Unidentified.
Hello, good morning, good evening, good day, good afternoon, and aloha. Welcome back to another episode of the Unidentified Celebrity Review, your home for credible news, reviews, and commentary on everything UFOs and sometimes other things. But usually these live streams are saved for specifically UFOs. So if it's your first time here, please do me a huge solid and smash that subscribe button, hit that like button, and don't forget to ring that bell. That way you are notified anytime we have guests on the show. And today we have a really, really fun guest. I'm going to go ahead and read his bio just because I thought his bio was so great. And our guest is Alejandro Rojas. He writes and blogs about science, entertainment, and the paranormal. Alejandro has spent many hours in the field of investigating anomalous phenomena up close and personal. He is the editor and contributor writer for OpenMinds.tv and among others, and has been featured on the Travel Channel, Sci-Fi, National Geographic, and the E! Channel. He is a columnist for the Daily Roswell Daily Record and is a real estate professional in Arizona. So without further ado, the man, the myth, the legend, I like to call him the Godfather. I'll explain why in a little bit. Mr. Alejandro Rojas. Hello, sir. How are you?
Talking about?
Just when I thought they was out, they pulled me back in.
That's how I feel about UFOs,
Yeah.
dude. There's been times where I've tried to get out and it just won't happen. It just doesn't work.
Well, I know you took a break, and we're going to talk about that break in a couple minutes. So if you don't know who Alejandro Rojas is, Google him. We're not going to spend too much time because I only have an hour and there's a ton of questions and a ton of things I want to get to. But first things first is I want to get to know Alejandro Rojas. I've been listening to you, like I said earlier in the pre-show, for about 10 years. And I picked up your podcast when I was moving from New York City to Los Angeles. And I had stopped listening to UFOs, and I have my own experience that I've had, and it's something I was really into. And then right after high school, when I moved to New York City, all of that stuff kind of just hit the wayside. And then when I moved to Los Angeles, I was bored out of my mind. I was like, oh man, I wonder if there's any UFO podcasts. And I Googled it, and the first thing that came up was your show. So ever since then, I've been a really, really big fan. So my first question out of the bat is, where were you born? Where are you from? What's your
Denver?
Denver, Colorado.
Yeah.
Okay, what's I mean, can you tell me what year were you born? Do you mind telling me?
I don't mind. It was 1973, July.
1973. Okay.
My parents were both fairly young, in their 20s, which is young for these days.
Yep.
My dad not too long back from Vietnam, and
so your dad is a Vietnam veteran.
Yeah, he is.
Wow.
And so from Denver, my family comes from the San Luis Valley. It used to be all the Mexicans in Denver, all their family came from the San Luis Valley, which was, on the border of New Mexico and Colorado, because lots of our families, lots of the people in that area, and I call them Mexicans, but we're kind of, a lot of us, our roots go back to New Mexico for a long time, like thousands of years. So, all of those people in that area, we used to say in college, we didn't cross the border crossed us.
That's fair statement.
Yeah, that's where my family's mostly from.
What's so 1973. So what was your, because I was born in 80, so I could kind of understand what time frame you're in. And I mean, this is like 5 years before Star Wars. So yeah, I mean, I'd say probably about 1980, 82 is when you really sort of probably started understand who Alejandro was. But let me ask you the question: what was your favorite age as a child, or even as an adult? Do you have a favorite age?
I don't know. You know what? I would say, and this might be kind of weird, it's almost like my current age is typically my favorite age, because I feel like I'm growing and understanding on a regular basis. And that's kind of been, for me, a continuing thing. And it's probably why I like this field or doing journalism, is I like research. So I'm always in school getting different certificates or degrees or doing some sort of learning. And that's why I say that, because I learn every day. And I feel like the more knowledge I have, the more balance I have in life, the better I'm off. And so I know more now than ever. And so I would say, yeah. Now, is that fair?
No, that's fair. I was not expecting that answer, and that's exactly what I was hoping for, an unexpected answer. I mean, my answer is like 13, like right before high school.
People wouldn't get this. They were a disaster.
Yeah.
I mean, I was an emotional wreck as a teenager.
Okay.
I feel on the inside.
Yeah.
Later on in life, I really got into meditation and how to balance those things. If you were to ask people, when I tell friends, oh my gosh, in my teenage years, I was an emotional mess, they would say, what? You were calm and, I didn't get that from you. But inside, that's how it was. So, my teenage years were so confusing. I was so awkward.
Yeah, that's okay. I mean, a lot of folks have awkward teenage years. If you don't, I don't know who you are. So what was, I guess, in high school then, if we're talking about that, what was your favorite activity to do? Were you part of any clubs that you really enjoyed?
Well, you know what? It's kind of funny is that, for better or worse, wow, I didn't expect this. This is all about my life.
Yeah.
Better not make me cry.
No, I hope not. But I mean, hey, maybe some more viewers if we get some tears. That's what they say.
You know how the interviewers like Barbara Walters always making people cry.
Always making people cry.
What was the question again?
Sorry. So the question was clubs in high school, things, extracurricular activities. Yeah,
I worked really because I grew up. At least when I got into high school, I was kind of in a upper middle class part of Denver, Lakewood. I went to a school called Wheat Ridge High School, which is known for kind of some affluential type of people. Which was good in one manner and bad in another. It was good in that a lot of my friends were serious about education and things like that. And that's where I got into math and science. I was in like honors or advanced physics. But in order to keep up with them as far as toys, which I never could do, I had to work. So I was mostly working either at restaurants or later on in my high school career, I got a job at a King Soopers grocery store out there, the Kroger grocery stores out there. And I worked there for a long time. And so I was mostly working, unfortunately. So I lost track of my friends a little bit in that, but then I could buy some of the toys and I was the only, and one teacher actually asked this in one of my classes, how many of you, and he was kind of trying to make the point that we were all spoiled brats, essentially.
Right.
But he asked, how many of you bought your own vehicle? I was the only one to raise my hand. And I think he got a little bit embarrassed by that. He didn't mean to like single anybody out. Right. And I don't think he knew there were, kids there who didn't come from the same background. And so, not that I'm resentful of that at all. I appreciate that, and I wasn't at the time, I was like, I'm just going to go do this. And I did it. So I took some pride in that, actually. So, so that's how I was a little bit different in a way. And I guess for that, it's always made me used to kind of standing, not necessarily being in the group, but standing on the outside looking in type of thing. So, so I was working. There wasn't a whole lot of clubs or sports I even got to get involved with. Yeah. But I was even back then, math and science were like a big thing to me. And for the most part, I wanted to get involved with the aerospace industry, NASA or something like that. And my first major ended up being aerospace engineering. I wanted to be a rocket scientist at first before I found journalism.
Wow. Okay. So how long did you get into being a rocket scientist before you're like, you know what? I think it was only majors.
A couple years, because even in college, I had to work my way through college. And it was at Mesa State College in Grand Junction where somehow I made friends with people at the newspaper or at the radio station. And one of my friends became the news director there, really good friend. And that's when I fell in love with journalism and the news. I loved doing radio.
Can you remember your very first thing you reported on?
Yes, it was the weather. And this is funny because I do a show with my buddy Doug Smythe, and that's actually stage name for him, but
Okay.
I was so nervous about getting on the air, like extremely nervous of just doing this in a small
Yeah.
town, you know. And so I told her I'll do it, but I'm going to change my name. And I went under the name Jonathan Smythe and pretended I used my terrible English accent and pretended I was English and stuff. And I did the weather every day with her as Jonathan Smythe.
Wow.
And then over time, I got more and more comfortable. What really made me most comfortable, to be honest, is I started doing some shows, some radio shows. And one of the spots that I loved to get was the reggae show, which was at night, like Friday night at 10 p.m. or something like that. And, I figured you got to do it right. So I would take maybe a hit or something, a little bit of marijuana, really eased me up. And it was kind of funny because I don't know if I wouldn't have done that show like that. I don't know if I would have ever gotten as comfortable as I did. I very quickly became comfortable on the radio after that.
Well, thank God for drugs. I guess is the moral of that story. Well, no, I'm glad that that's funny. That's the thing that got you going. I would have never expected that answer from you whatsoever. So that's some fun insight. I had no idea. So then I guess from that, where in this timeline did UFOs come into the picture?
It's funny in Grand Junction when I really jumped into news. I started working for the paper. We won some awards that way. I got involved with competition with a Hispanic journalism society, and so I was really into news, and I was covering news. I was also kind of playing both fields where I was like in student government. Doing really well there. I was president of our Chicano club, our Mexican American, or really it was our Latin American club, vice president of the Young Democrats. So I was really active in all that and covering news, like trying to look for news, write stories, cover news for the radio station. Because the next year after that, my friend graduated, I became the news director.
Well, let me ask you this:
during this time,
this
is what's funny.
Yeah.
To answer your question, there was some guy we met who was really into UFOs, and we thought he was so ridiculous, but he did make me think, and he was a little zany. I think he was a Stephen Greer guy or something, but this was early. This was in late 90s.
Yeah.
But it really made me think. And over time, I just started, and I've always been into sci-fi. I've always watched the documentaries actually on this topic because, my Native American Mexican background kind of made me more open to the paranormal, I think, other answers that might be out there. Mm-hmm. And so I was open to the idea, but I would look at it, but a bit skeptical, just mainly because of the mainstream's reaction to it. But when I found in like the late 90s that there was some credible stuff, that there were some very interesting people covering it, I started to ask, other journalists, professional journalists, why don't you guys cover this more? There are some credible people saying some interesting things. And they were like, there's just not much there. If there was something there was like this blind spot. And I caught this bug, and all of a sudden I'm like, that's one of my beats. I'm going to cover that. I don't even care. This is really interesting information people aren't really paying attention to. And that's where it kind of all started.
Do you remember the first thing you reported on that you actually put into print? Or
I didn't report for a long time. I did a lot of reading and research before I ever started reporting anything. And to be honest, I don't know what came first, the podcast or writing about it. I can't remember. I started writing for this little kind of like Medium. There was another online website like that where you could submit and say, hey, I would like to be a writer for this. And if they approved you, then you could start writing. So I started doing a lot of different paranormal stuff. But during my research period, I ran across MUFON, right. And then I found out their headquarters was right in Lakewood, the town next to me. So I went and joined, and I was really fortunate in that, I got to be involved with the national headquarters with John Schuessler, who helped start the organization. Incredible researcher. He is a scientist who did lots of contract work with NASA and others. And so he was a great mentor. So that really kind of beefed up all of my research and everything. So by the time I started interviewing people or writing about it, I was pretty well versed on the topic, fortunately.
Right. Well, that's awesome. That's such an interesting story. The weather. That's how you got into this. The weather.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so then transitioning into your sort of 10 plus career of making content on this topic. I mentioned a couple shows ago, I did a show about how it's okay to be wrong on this topic. Like it's okay. It's par for the course. Like no one's going to crucify you if you're wrong. But the problem is that I feel a lot of folks in this industry know they're wrong and they continue digging in their heels and they just won't move off of it. So I guess my question would be, is there ever a story or something you reported on where you, like, maybe a year later or 10 years later, you're just like, geez, man, I was way off on that. And you corrected it, or maybe you just forgot about it?
Probably the majority of stuff I covered in the beginning, I was wrong about. I definitely was less skeptical. I was very skeptical at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Then I went down the rabbit hole, and I feel like it became too. I became a believer. Not to use that as a derogatory term, but like
Right.
I just started believing a lot more. And I figured, well, with all the smoke, there's got to be fire in some cases.
Mm-hmm.
And and it takes a lot of work and research to follow that thread to investigate all of these cases. But I certainly, when I started doing that more and more, I found that all of the common assumptions around a lot of these cases or situations were completely either misinterpreted, spun, or just completely false. Like there was nothing there. The assumptions people made were just completely wrong. And that's what taught me to not jump to conclusions before you do the research, because even some of, John Schuster, even some of the people I really looked up to, let's say Richard Dolan, for instance, he was really someone I read, and I was good friends with Grant Cameron back then, stuff like that. I found out, whoa, a lot of people are just, wrong.
Right.
And so a lot of different things I found out about that I was wrong. When I think specifically, it would be hard to say. I guess some of the conspiracy, for instance, a belief that there was a whole lot of information that the government had.
Mm-hmm.
I've certainly come back on that. I was always at some of those things. I can't think of like a specific case right now where I was like, "Holy moly, I was so wrong on that one."
Yeah. Well, I'm not doing this because I'm trying to point out the things that you've done wrong,
You're
right?
calling me out.
I'm
No,
not,
I'm just kidding.
you're right. It's not my intention. It's just to let people know, hey, even you can be one of the smartest dudes around and know everything there is to know about this topic, and you still have to leave that window to be wrong. And I mean, look, the first thing that pops in my brain, and I've listened to almost all of your stuff, and I haven't gone back and re-listened to this. Is probably a 6 or 7 year old, maybe even 8-year-old memory, but for some reason the name Stan Romanek popped in my brain when I was like, oh, let me ask him about this, because I wonder, because I do remember, I think something along the lines of like you went to his house and there was some pictures and then something got erased, but it was
a lot more elaborate than that.
Yeah,
but first,
like I said, it's an old memory, and again, I'm not trying to call you out. This is not to say,
that's cool.
Look, this is how bad a reporter you are. Like, I'm just, it was something, for whatever reason, I wrote it down, and I'm like, I wonder if we could use this as an example, and just say, hey, look, this is where either I messed up or maybe I got something wrong. And again, this is a really old memory. I do not remember this podcast 100%.
You're right on, dude.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, no, you're right on. And I was getting that, what you're getting to, which is a very, very important point, We can all be wrong. We all are wrong.
Yeah.
None of us have the answers. And I love this saying when you hear people say, when you sit down and talk to someone and they say they've got all the right answers, most likely, and this is so true in this field, they don't know what they're talking about. They're completely way off. And I think that's true. Anybody in this field that says they have all the answers, they're way off. Way off. Nobody has all the answers.
Yeah.
And you're right. So with Romanek, I would say,
has your opinion changed on Romanek, or were those experiences that you had when you were with him? And I know a lot of stuff has come out about this guy, and it's just a super awkward person to talk about because there's a lot to go over with this guy. But you know, I've talked about Bob Lazar and all these other guys, and I didn't want to bother you with that question because I know that's probably the first thing people ask me about. And I've come off of Bob Lazar. I've talked to Martin. I've listened to you, and I'm pretty sure I know where I'm at with him. But that was just the one thing that I kind of was like, you know, let me see how he feels 8 years after he worked or spent time with him, not worked with him.
Well, I'll tell you, a friend of mine, I did a talk because I don't talk about Romanek much, but I did this talk about 6 or 7 years ago at Contact in the Desert. And it was a workshop. It was Sunday morning. I knew there wouldn't be many people, but my good friend Jordan Peace, who runs the Rogue Valley Metaphysical Library, he says, hey, I would really love you to summarize what you think of the Romanek case and your history there. Yeah. And I said, I'll do that for you specifically mostly, but I'll do that. So I did that. The talk was recorded, and only in the last few weeks has my buddy Jordan posted that. So if you look for the Rogue Valley Metaphysical Library, you can see my lecture if you want to get my whole background with this.
Absolutely, we'll do that.
I became friends with the family.
Right.
The extended family, his wife, his stepkids. His stepkids were very skeptical of Stan the entire time. They told me they had busted him in cheating, and I was skeptical most of the time too.
When you say cheating, do you mean cheating the videos?
Faking things. Yeah.
Okay.
And so I told them,
cheating on his wife?
You've got to catch him. I'll work with you. I'll help you bust him if this is true. Yeah. They were kids. They weren't into it enough to do that. And they love their mom, and their mom is an absolutely wonderful person. Stan was always sketchy, and really all of his friends, we were all kind of like, there's weird things happening. I don't know that we trust him completely, but we were all friends. And I didn't think he would deceive me directly until I started catching him doing that. Yeah. So, and it is twofold. One of the things I would like to write about. So was I wrong about Stan? That is one thing I tend to do, is tend to think more about a person than I'm a kind of a bit of a, Pollyanna, where I think people are better than they are a lot of times. Mm-hmm. But, and that was certainly true of him. But at the same time, one or two of the best UFO cases ever are related to him. The thing is he makes it seem like those are his cases and he's integral to the case. Not true. He was one of many people that had these sightings with him. So, do I believe him? I regret in a way my name getting associated with him as much as it did. I stand by that. I don't believe his wife has lied. I think she's a very honest, just a great, wonderful person. Mm-hmm. But he certainly lied and cheated and made stuff up. Yeah. But at the same time, there are still some interesting cases that he was associated with that I think have not been resolved. I think it's a case of what Ben Hansen, and he said he was thinking of Stan when he came up with this. He came up with this term legendizing, which I think Billy Meyer suffers from this, maybe others, where they have a sighting or some involved with some sort of UFO event. Just like that happens in this field, it blows up. And everybody in the UFO field is like, oh my God, that's amazing. And you get all of these followers and people looking up to you. And then they want to keep feeding the monster by making stuff up. Right. And I think that's what Stan does, is legendizing. I think that's where Billy Meyer was. I know he had, like Billy Meyer in this case, had a couple of interesting sightings, at least one in particular with, I think she was the ambassador to India or something like that. And that's when he started, feeding the monster. So was I wrong? I don't know that I was wrong to look into it.
Well, I mean,
And
look, it's not. It doesn't even matter if you're wrong or right. At the end of it, there is. I feel like you just explained it perfectly. You know,
And
there
I'm
are.
100% ready to say when
Yeah,
I'm wrong. And you're calling something out here though that is really important, which is we never should all feel like we have to be right all the time. None of us are
right.
going to be. It's okay, and this is a problem a lot of people have in this field, at least the authorities or the people
Right.
who espouse to know something. It's okay to say I don't know, and it's
Yeah.
okay to say I was wrong about that, and
Yes.
here's what went down.
Preach, preach, preach. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I cannot agree with you more. Before we continue, I just want to say thank you to everyone that's in the stream so far. Ryan Sprague's actually in the stream. Adam,
Yo.
Rigo, Jane, Kai Jane. So thank you all for joining. And I guess then my next question would be, do you have a least favorite question? Is there ever a question that just always comes up where you're just like, oh God, why? Or a topic or something where you just like, I don't want to talk about this.
I guess not really. It's the approach to the question.
Okay.
So I don't mind the question. What's really hard is when you have again, using that term believer, but when you have someone who has an unsubstantiated belief, I'll put it that way, and are insistent that they're right, and they're trying to trip you up, and they will not accept your answer, and they're trying to get you to believe in them, or at least trying to trick you up to show they're right or something like that. That does frustrate me because, and you know what that's like. You've probably seen that because there are, especially in this field, those people who interview people, they have a world mindset. And instead of asking questions, they're asking for people to confirm their pre-existing beliefs.
Yeah. Totally. I mean, you said that perfectly. I think that, yeah, I just wish people would have more of a dialogue in this field and be comfortable with being wrong and be comfortable with being called out. And if it's something, like, and I guess that would sort of segue into the next thing. And I don't want to spend a lot of time on Bob because there's just been an ad nauseum amount of time spent on this person, and I think it's just a waste. But it that leads in sort of into the next thing with Bob Lazar and. Can you tell me percentage wise how truthful you think this guy is?
At this point, it's really low.
Really, really low.
And it's more low than it even was a few months ago. And it's just because I've always been kind of on the fence. I'm a huge George Knapp fan. So I've always kind of taken his word for it. I've seen sketchy stuff. And I do tell George when I have a problem. We have a very honest dialogue. So I've always kind of been on the fence, leaning back and forth a little bit, mostly leaning towards not believing him, to be honest. But, even more recently, I paid more attention to some of the history there. And I read at least one piece that was really well put together. And it's bad. It's really bad. He has a history of being dishonest, a very rich history of being dishonest with law enforcement, family. I mean, those are the type of people that if you're lying to on a regular basis, that's bad. That's someone who definitely does not have a commitment to telling the truth. And it kind of gets back to, this field is it's like science. We're in a lot of this is why I appreciate the scientific research or research. The evidence and the facts can stand by themselves. And if you get into the Lazar situation, we have nothing. We have just it's a belief system.
Yeah.
There's nothing there to build. And I tell this is my new thing to tell people. I would love to write an article proving Bob Lazar is right, proving Roswell is right, or X, Y, and Z. I just can't do it. If I could, I would. I just don't have the material. There isn't the evidence there to support.
So when you give that kind of pushback to George Knapp, what does he say? Like, what are his responses to this? Is this George's blind spot? Because like you said, I don't think I would switch you and George Knapp as the godfather of UFOlogy right now, because Stan, oh my God, why did I say Stan?
Friedman.
Freeman,
gone.
yes, because he's gone. And I feel like one of you two guys would be best to fill those shoes, even though there's no one on the planet that could fill those shoes. But you're sort of, for me, you're the guy holding the torch. You're the guy that I follow. And the reason why is because you're okay with going, hey, I was way off on that one. I was wrong. And here are the facts. And these are the new things. So how do we hold George's feet to the fire without insulting him, without losing access, without putting into question all of the great work that he's done? Can you give me a little bit of insight into sort of how he counter argues you, or is there an intellectual standpoint that where he's coming from, where we're just, for at least maybe, I don't want to say we, but I am not understanding?
Yeah. Our conversations always come down to this. They always on this topic. He's conceded to me, and I don't think he would mind. I think he's done this publicly. He's conceded that he doesn't believe the educational background that Lazar says he has. He's told me that flat out, because, that's an untenable position, I think, to believe that he really has that educational background anyway, even though, with all due respect, I know Jeremy Corbell believes it. It always has come down to there's just information confirming the story that he's gotten that he can't share. And that's what we get down to. And I, and I've told him this, and we agree. And I'm like, well, if I don't have that information, you understand then why my position remains what it is. And he says, yes, if I were you, I think I would have the same perspective. So, and sometimes it does come down to that. He is an honest, good journalist, and a good journalist is not going to shy away from a fair fight. He's right. He will take fair arguments, and I
guess the only issues that I have, and again, man, like I don't mean to be a jerk here. I'm just seeing it. I'm just calling it how I see it. When you're a producer on the film, on basically anything that comes out about Bob Lazar, in one way or another, George Knapp is tied to it, either from a producer standpoint, or whatever. He's in the film. I don't know how, people get paid on these productions. I'm an actor, so I kind of get an idea. When you're a producer, you're not going to produce something without trying to see some return on it. So is that a conflict of interest when he's making these films and he's producing them and he's selling us this story that is on Netflix, that has got him interviews on now Joe Rogan, which is the biggest platform out there, and he's pitching this story that he knows on some level is just not accurate. It's just not true. And like you said, when you point out all of these things that this summary of things that just keep coming back over and over and over and over again, you're just like, there's no proof. There's so many things that say this guy is being dishonest, including 3 body language experts that work for the CIA and all sorts of different parts of the government and interviewed terrorists. And the science is bad. And the science is bad. They are telling you he's lying. So can you understand how I can look at George Knapp and go, dude, you need to, it almost feels like he's digging his heels in on this. He's so deep into the story that at this point, if he turns around and he says, you know what, it's all bullshit, or it's just wrong, not bullshit, I wasn't selling you, I was wrong. Do you feel like part of him is thinking, oh, this is just going to destroy my career? In my opinion, I think it would boost it. It would help his credibility even more if he stopped selling this story.
And maybe I don't think it's me being a Pollyanna here again, no, but I don't believe if George found Lazar was lying, I personally believe he would share that. Immediately, he would get that out there. I don't believe he would cover for him. I think that George believes he has information that confirms Lazar's story. That's why he believes Lazar.
So there's like one linchpin thing that he can't share with anybody.
Exactly. There's a one linchpin thing. Now, do I feel there is that linchpin and evidence? I'm skeptical. Do I think that ask you this. George is lying? No.
What would that piece of evidence have to be to change your mind on that?
I mean, if there was, it would have to be more than anecdotal. depending on the where that anecdotal information was coming from. So for instance, let's say, it's confirmed by coworkers at Area 51 and maybe, some of the UAP task force guys or something like that. Or it turns out that was part of the briefing and a colonel back, an admiral says, yeah, we were paying Lazar to do this. Something really official like that. But I don't think it's disingenuous, or if George is producing, and we know this, here's an example. Mark O'Connell and Ben, I interviewed Ben Hansen. I'm huge Ben, who I mentioned earlier, who's on this new show, UFO Witness. I don't agree with the show. I think there's some inaccuracies in the show, and we debated that. Mark O'Connell, who wrote the book about J. Allen Hynek, is a co-executive producer on that show.
Right.
But Mark has been very strict about keeping to the facts, yet that show doesn't keep to the facts. I think there's we can criticize a little bit there and call that out, but at the same time, Mark doesn't mean just because he's a co-producer or any sort of producer on the show, or Ben, that they have input into the final cut or how that show is put together. If I asked George, it's very plausible that if I said, hey, I'm going to do a documentary on Travis Walton, will you come on as a producer? He would probably say yes, even if I screwed the document up, and he's putting putting himself on the line. But it wouldn't be his fault if something got screwed up in that documentary or some factual issues. It would be my fault. It would be his own mistake is putting faith in me.
Yeah, so but it is a little fair to say. Would it be fair to say though that Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp are almost inseparable? They're like, at least from the outside looking in, it seems like they're best buds.
Well, they're partners, and there's a commitment there that they've made to each other, and they hold to that commitment. I think that's fair, and I think that that we can't blame George for all of Jeremy's mistakes. I don't know that Jeremy's pieces are the best when it comes to investigative, journalism, but that's not what he's doing either necessarily. He's also doing kind of artsy pieces, and that's what he calls it. It's his own style.
But he's also calling them documentaries, isn't he?
Yeah. He does, and in a manner they are. He's documenting his research into this stuff and new revelations we haven't seen before.
Right.
But and to many people, they're not convincing. My mom even watched, and I because I was curious, she sat down and watched the Bob Lazar one, and she was like, don't buy it. Even though a lot of us in the UFO field are like, wow, and I didn't give her any background. If she knew what I knew about that case, she would even think it was even less credible. Right. But just by watching that documentary alone, she just didn't find it credible. So,
all right. Well, I guess I could go more on Bob, but I think we shouldn't, just because I think it's a waste of time.
But it's a good example of, I think you use that as a good example of people getting it wrong, and I don't like that George does get demonized for this, because when I say I don't believe Bob Lazar, it's not meaning go attack George Knapp. Right. No, I mean, I just do not, when I look at the evidence, I don't come to the same conclusions. And it's fair for all of us to have different perspectives. I think we have to allow it.
I'm not trying to light George Knapp on fire.
I'm definitely not trying to do that.
No, for sure. And I'm just trying to do is hold his feet to the fire a little bit, because he is a producer. He is making money on this thing. It did get him incredible exposure to not only the Coast to Coast AM, but the films that he makes and the things that he's produced in his website and his podcast. I mean, it's a business, and I totally understand that. But I think if you want to elevate that business even more, you need to be a little bit more honest with yourself and with the people that you're talking about, and just be okay with being wrong. That's it. That's all. I think the work he's done in Russia, just the other day he released an interview that I totally forgot about with him and George Carlin, and I'm like, oh my God, this is
the majority of information. When that New York Times article came out about ATIP, that was it. That was the big mainstream piece. There were a few things that we got. There were two sources that provided us all the abundance of information that we got after that. Besides, of course, Lou, who wasn't talking to people for a long time, George Knapp and Brian Bender of Politico were finding the scoops. George, even more so. George was feeding us information on a regular basis. I mean,
Yeah.
George, that's
He's
the beauty of
valuable.
George.
He's
Yeah.
valuable. He's got a lot of value. Again, you know, if it's just this one hiccup I got, the one thing that he's really digging his heels in, I'm just like, dude, just please let it go, and let's just go on. Because here's the thing, we already have an abundance of info. You could start UFOlogy at 2017. You can start it there, and it would be more than enough to continue this conversation forward. You don't need Bob Lazar, you don't need Roswell, you don't need Betty and Barney Hill, you don't need any of these things. Well, they're great. I love that they're there, and it's a rich thing to always pull from. But I'm just saying, like this is now a science conversation. This is no longer fantasy, and so
yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just saying, and the sooner we get our heads out of the clouds and start talking about it like it's a scientific subject as opposed to a sci-fi book, the better it will be for everyone. So yes, last thought.
I just find this really funny is that Dr. Eric Davis, who of course has great credentials, he hates the Lazar story. He thinks Lazar is totally full. He gets upset, very irate about the mere mention of his name. He thinks it's so ridiculous because the science is so bad, let alone he feels the whole thing's convoluted. Yet, George and Jeremy love to quote Eric Davis because he claims that he's heard these rumors that Roswell was real. There was this crash retrieval project that happened that was closed down in the 80s, he told me in my now infamous interview with him. So that is a bit of I think that's a bit problematic too. If you're using this person as your main source, that there have been these crash retrievals that have gotten back engineered, then why do you ignore one side of his anecdotal opinionated information and not the other?
Right. No, I mean that's totally fair. It's totally fair. So to sort of, I guess, switch gears here a little bit, the question that's on the board right now, before you answer that question, is Joe Rogan good for UFOlogy?
That's a good question, and here's why. I don't like to make judgment calls as far as what's good and bad for ufology, because I think that it can make you spin your wheels, because in the end, it doesn't matter. Nobody cares what you think is good or bad for ufology. It is what it is, and you got to deal with it.
Right.
And I think that's a more productive way to approach these sort of things. Do I find Joe Rogan good for anything? I'm not a fan of Joe Rogan's at all.
Really?
I think it's this kind of dangerous. It supports this dangerous kind of toxic bro technology with this, it's a common term, but I believe in it, that we have a big problem in our society with this toxic masculinity. He's played with, these people who have been white supremacists and others. And I don't agree with that. I'm not a big fan of his approach to and his take on the world, to be honest. I think it's great that he exists. He's great that he's, people appeal to him. I think it's important to pay attention to people that people appeal to. Is he a good or bad? I don't know. It's really hard to say. On the one hand, he's sharing with people that there's some credible information after years and years of debunking everything and laughing at it. On the other hand, he is falling whole cloth and promoting Bob Lazar and stuff like this. So he doesn't seem to be have a lot of discrimination, nor a lot of real research. At the same time, he is listening to some pretty good people. I mean, it's good to listen to Elizondo. Like I said, I'm a huge George Knapp fan, so that's someone that's worth listening to.
Well, I don't know. The best person right now outside, the best I don't want to say the best person because I think you're the best person, but I think the
Mhm.
best scientist out there right now that has a large platform that he speaks on is Lex Fridman. And
Hmm.
Lex is good friends with Joe, but he's, an MIT professor. He's a physicist. He knows his shit, and he's very much a proponent of talking about this scientifically. And that's what I love about him the most. And I think the best interview I've ever heard of Commander David Fravor was by Lex Fridman. It's a 4-hour
Great.
conversation. And the
Wow.
first 3 hours are just talking about Fravor's life, how he got into the cockpit, with the decisions that got him all the way there. And then the last hour was the UFO. That
I've got to listen. I've got a
you
long drive
have
later
to.
this
Oh
week. I've
man,
gotta listen to it.
please. I
Okay,
think,
I will.
honestly, it's the best interview I've ever heard because
Wow.
there was no time limit. It was just go, and it was a beautiful conversation. And Lex's theory, or sort of, he's a big proponent of love, but past that, it's imagine if this is true, even if it's not. But if we were talking about this scientifically in universities, in high schools, in elementary schools, and we were putting the idea that this is possible out there, how it would inspire a generation, 2 generations of kids that are going to be thinking way outside the box when it comes to propulsion.
Well,
And
and
we need
that
that.
was Tom DeLonge's argument
Mhm.
when he went to these insiders originally and said, "Look, you look really bad. The kids think you guys are conspiring and you're holding back Roswell and all this stuff. You need to change that perspective. Get people into the kids love UFOs. This is how you get them involved with science and government." And that's how his To the Stars got these connections. I don't know that they came all completely around on that, unfortunately.
Yeah.
It's what it demonstrated, and this is what I love about what Tom did, is it demonstrated they're open to that idea. They're open to interacting with this topic in a professional manner that is scientific, and it helps encourage, especially the youth, to get interested in science and everything. And I think that is a good sign, because that means that there is some space there. There is some common ground.
Yeah, well, the conversation is shifting, especially just in the last 3 months with the Harvard professors and Israeli professors and just the CIA directors. Like, a lot of credible people are coming out and saying some pretty amazing things, and there's no proof to back these amazing things up. I mean, the closest is probably Oumuamua, but we caught it on the way out of the solar system, which is fascinating to me. I can't even believe that happened.
I'm reading
And
book right now.
yeah,
That's a scientist from Harvard who says he thinks, it's likely extraterrestrial. So it's incredible that we're at this time when a very esteemed, professor at Harvard, the head
yeah,
of the astronomy department,
yeah.
is saying, "Hey, this is probably aliens."
Right, but for me, it also shows how science has still got a long way to go, because they let this professor out in the rain. No one is coming to back him up. No one is like, "Yep, he's got a point." And it just goes to show that scientists are just dicks. They're kind of
But
asses.
down. And it's not necessarily that they're like that. It's the system is like that. And it takes people like him to change that system. And it is changing. So for
Yeah,
instance, with Tabby Star, or even with Oumuamua, in both of the scientific papers that analyze these astronomical, situations, anomalies, they added the possibility that it's extraterrestrial. It's amazing that we're at the point where graduate students or scientists are in a place where they can feel that they can even go there,
right.
but they are going there. And
Yeah.
SETI is moving more in that direction. Now they're looking for techno signatures. What are those? Those are kind of archaeological evidence of past civilizations. So they're moving in that direction. And I think things are moving in a positive direction. But, I work very closely with the Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies, the SCU. And there are a growing number of scientists that we have coming and saying we're interested, although a lot of them still want to remain anonymous because it's the institutions that we really have to change. They're afraid of, looking bad, of risk aversion, and that's what people have to understand, this risk aversion thing where they don't want to jeopardize funding or their other projects, so they have to be careful about the manner in which they approach stuff.
Well, it seems like the tables are turning.
They are.
And what's fun is we can see the table turning. That's what's cool. We're in the middle of that table turn. So it's fun to watch. So okay, we've only got 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to quickly say, if there's one thing I'd love to see on Joe Rogan when he interviews folks that have to do with the UFO phenomenon, is you. I would love to interview you, and I would love for you to set his ass straight on a lot of things that are just wrong. And I think if he's serious, and I'm calling Rogan out right now, if you're serious about getting to the bottom of this, you need to have Alejandro Rojas on your program, and your platform is the one that should be blown up. People should know about you.
I would love to be on the show.
I think you would be an amazing interview for him because, it's a 3-hour, format. You could really get into some stuff and break. I would love to just have you come back and let's talk about why Bob Lazar is wrong, and go into detail of it. But anyway, that's for hopefully another time. I do have some more questions that I want to squeeze in here if we can in the next 10 minutes. On Ryan Sprague's show the other day, he interviewed Lou Elizondo, and he said something wonderful, which was, people ask him all the time, well, when's disclosure? When are we going to get disclosure? He's like, look around, look at what's happening. So my question to you is, what is your definition of disclosure? Because I have a feeling this definition changes from person to person. So I'd like to hear what Alejandro Rojas would need to come on a podcast tomorrow and say, this is 100% definitively real, and this is what it is. What would you need to sway you?
Well, there's different levels, and I understand what Lou is saying, and he's been saying this for a while, and I've tried to explain this to people, and it's really weird because the UFO community especially has these blinders on. It's almost like, that old story of the Aztecs seeing the Spanish, ships and they couldn't see them, which is total bunk anyway. But it's almost like that idea, though, because Lou has already said what he thinks about disclosure, and people are like, well, what do you think about disclosure? I just told you. But people don't want to. I would say when you're saying the tables are turning, the UFO community itself is the worst. They are doing the opposite. They are tearing down all of the credible effort that the Pentagon, UFO Twitter, the whole UFO community just doesn't get it. And here's why.
Can I just say real quick before you continue? I think it's a minority. The loudest people are always like, I think if you polled everyone in the United States and you gave them a real quiz on this, I think we'd be shocked at how many people.
I would agree with you there, but I would say that's not the UFO community. The UFO community are the ones out there making the noise and stuff. I would agree with you there because I do agree. Like, for instance, my listeners, I've got a lot of listeners, fortunately, but I hear from a fraction of them, a small fraction. But I know that they appreciate what I'm doing because they're there every week, every time I'm doing something, they're there. So I get what you're saying to that point. But when it comes to disclosure, it would be the official disclosure of what? The official disclosure that UFOs are a real phenomenon. Right. I think that's always been my goal, and that's where we've already gotten. Just exactly what Lou's saying. Lou is saying, wait, I thought you guys wanted disclosure, and I thought disclosure was an official admission that we take UFOs seriously and it's a true phenomenon. Well, that happened.
Right.
That happened. That has happened. But a lot of people take disclosure as, tell us the truth about Roswell. Well, or tell us the truth about this or that or this, when their truth is already this predisposed idea, most of the time that is totally ridiculous and unfounded, unsubstantiated, zero proof of evidence that their version of the truth is that. What's really frustrating is people keep asking, so why are they doing this? Why are they finally letting them talk, and why are they finally letting disclosure happen? Or, and this idea that this is a small part of a bigger disclosure, that is fantasy land.
Right.
There is no evidence for any of that. If you follow, and this is why I love these particular stories I've written, like especially a one about how Tom DeLonge helped make this happen, how these intelligence community insiders made this happen. Because who made this happen? A small group of very dedicated scientists and government contractors who have been interested in this topic, who have been researching this topic, trying to get more government research. They have been making leaps and bounds in the last few years because of the strategy that people like Chris Mellon and Lou Elizondo, with help from Tom DeLonge and Steve Justice and all these other people that were with To the Stars, they're the ones who have brought us here. Begrudgingly, the government didn't say, oh, we can open up a little and let them know something. No, that's not how it worked. These guys did an end run. They were educated and intelligent. They did an end run around the government, around how government processes work, and they were able to make all of this happen. And Lou is suffering from it. Yeah. The DOD has made up lies about him. They've said he never worked at these things. They've made his life more difficult. They're making him suffer for essentially being a whistleblower. He says, I'm not a whistleblower because I didn't release anything that was classified. I didn't do anything illegal, which is true, but he's still a whistleblower in the manner in which he shared information to the public that they didn't want out. That wasn't intended, they didn't want the public to know about. That's how this came about. Yeah. So disclosure in that sense has happened. We are in a post-disclosure. We're now in the world that I was trying to, since I was a kid in college in journalism and thought this is the beat. My goal was there's a lot of credible information here. The military is taking this seriously. The world has to know this. And now they do know. Thanks to Chris Mellon, thanks to Lou Elizondo, thanks to the Navy for coming forward and saying we do take it seriously. All of these journalists who work so hard and put their necks on the lines, the scientists who have done the same. Now we have that. We're there.
Yeah.
This is a post. Lou puts it this way, and a lot of people, this is a post-disclosure world.
Yeah.
And now we need to deal with that. And the UFO community largely isn't. Who is mainstream people who are now starting to get involved with this. People like Adam, who is, I know, listening. Adam Kehoe doing incredible work. People like the guy who runs SkyHub, Steve McDaniels, or people like Kevin Knuth, a scientist who's coming forward and sharing scientific information and analysis on this. These are the people who now are coming out of the woodwork because of what Lou and Chris have done, who are really, they're the people that are really starting to make a difference.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I would love to get more in depth on sort of the definition of disclosure, but I wanted to talk about this real quick before you go, because it's an idea that popped into my head, and I think it's something worth maybe joining up forces for. So right here I've got on the screen is the countdown to possible UFO disclosure. I didn't know how else to label it, but that's what it is. And I've already know, and just like you just said, basically, with the whole disclosure definition, we have to manage our expectations. There's probably nothing that's going to come out after 156 days is over from now. But the thing that I thought would be useful, because I think you'd agree, and maybe I should just ask you the question real quick. What is if you can, real quickly, what is the most useful thing any one citizen can do to help move this discussion forward?
That's what really is real frustrating, is that while the UFO community is talking about this disclosure is great, we're going to hear about Zeta Reticuli probably tomorrow or next week. No, this is the integral moment right now. People are like, where's Chris Mellon? Where's Lou Elizondo? You know where they are. They're right where they've been the whole time. They're in Washington, D.C. They're on the phone. They're talking to their colleagues at the Pentagon, at the White House. They're telling in the intelligence community, and they're telling them, look, there's a lot to this. You've got to share the truth. You've got to share a lot of information. Meanwhile, they've got a lot out, everything else on their hands. Like most people, they would rather just kind of shove this to the side and move on with the other important things that they've got going on. And that is the battle. What can people do right now?
Right.
Call the White House, call your legislators, call the government, call the DOD.
That is exactly what I was hoping you would say.
All of this is right now is the most important. We can't leave Chris Mellon. We got to have his back.
Okay,
he's out there, and I know this for a fact. He's out there trying to do this, and I think this is important.
Yeah.
He feels that they're dropping the ball.
Yes.
He is right now concerned, and George Knapp wrote up a story on this just a week or two ago, that they're not taking this seriously. In this report, they're not putting a lot of effort or information in this report. So if we get nothing out of this report, it's our own damn fault, because right now is the time where we need to say, we know you've got stuff. We know there's something interesting here. We want more information.
Well, here's what I propose, because that's exactly how I hope you would have answered. Call Congress, right? So this is my proposal for every single UFO program, podcast, show, host, writer, blogger, myself included. I think we should organize a day between now and 156 days where all of us come together and do a live stream, do a podcast that we release on the same day where we all call Congress. That's the show. We're calling Congress. We give out a pamphlet if you want a script, if you're nervous to call. But I think doing a live stream, calling Congress, maybe getting them on speakerphone, giving them your opinions, encouraging people that watch your show to do the exact same thing, put the links in the description. And I think if we all did this on the same day, if we could all organize and do what I'm going to call the big phone home, that's what I labeled it. If we can all get together and come somehow, I don't know if this is stupid and I'm thinking way too sort of like, lovey-dovey and this world is great and people are going to totally dig this, tell me if I'm crazy. But I don't think it's a bad idea if you, Martin, George, Jeremy, anyone that is interested in this topic to devote one of their programs to calling Congress, calling the Department of Defense, giving them your 2 cents. And I think if we organize, we got a month and a half, all we got to do is put a date, somebody writes a script, and we all do it. And I think, I don't know, is that crazy? Do you think that would help?
Rodrigo in the chat, who joins chat often on my shows too, who's awesome. I love him. No, the next one, the last one.
Yep.
This is what I say. Let's do it, muchachos. I think it's a great idea. I don't think I do think you're a little crazy, but I love that about you, and I love the idea. I think it's a great idea, and I definitely would want to be a part of it.
Great. I think well, let's start something here. Let's see if we can get the bug in people's ears and get some fire under some asses and just make some phone calls. It's that simple. I mean, if we put this pressure on senators and we put the pressure on the Department of Defense, who knows? Maybe we get those 2 reports released. Who knows? But I think you're right, and I think Chris Mellon his suspicion is correct. They're just going to put together some last minute thing, almost like writing your book report the night before and turning it in, and they're like, "Here, is this good enough?" No, it's not good enough. But by that point, it's too late. If this comes out, who knows when we're going to get another shot to actually put some pressure on. So I don't know if there's. I'm trying to. What was the date of Roswell? July 2nd.
July 6th or 7th,
if we did it on the anniversary of some event or something like that, and we put a name to it and everybody just talks about it. I don't think it could hurt, right?
No, I think it's a great idea. And I'm totally willing to work with you on this.
I
think Ryan's listening. Ryan's awesome. I think Ryan will help us out.
Yeah.
And join on this. Let's see if he answers. I think it's a great idea. I'm in. Let's do it. And I think it's great. I'm totally in. I want to do this.
Well, I did have some other questions for you, but we've run out of time. We're 4 minutes over.
10 more minutes. As long as the boss doesn't come out and start yelling at me.
All right. So then my last question, and this is speculation land. Okay, I asked the same question to Ryan. If you can go into a UFO Vegas, okay, and it's roulette, you had to put your chips on black or white. Is this a real phenomenon or is it not?
You mean as in unidentified?
Yeah, I'm not talking about alien. I'm not talking about extraterrestrials. Is this phenomenon real?
As in something, I guess, define the real. It's real in that people do see things that they can't identify. Is it real in that it's something we've never seen before?
Yeah.
Is it real have a definition for maybe?
That's a great question. I didn't think you were going to hit me back with this. So then let me switch it up. Let me ask you this. What's your best guess? What are we dealing with? Are we dealing with extraterrestrial? Are we dealing with something that science just hasn't figured out? And maybe it's similar to like lightning, and our eyes are sort of displaying this or filtering this as something very weirder than a lightning. Is it time travelers? If you had to take a guess, pure speculation, just having fun here, what would you put your money on? Because why you think about that?
I know that I would, because here's where I am with this, and I gotta, I'm where like Valet and Hynek were for most of their career, and I think it's the right place to be. And I guess just having done this, I try not to be predisposed to any idea because I just don't know. We don't have the data. And what I want to do is keep gathering that data till we know. I mean, why do I think it's so important that we pay attention? Because we got to figure it out. And there's just not enough resources put towards us to figure it out. Do I think it's possible that it's something extremely exotic? Yes. And that's what's so exciting about it, because it's entirely possible that we could be being visited. That could be the case. And if it is even a potential, shouldn't we look into it? Or what if it's a window into another dimension, or it is time travelers? Don't we want to know this? We definitely. Or if it's a foreign government that has broken the code to gravity and now they're freaking, building these things, we want to know that. Or if it's our government doing that, we want to know that too. So I just really couldn't do it. I couldn't say for sure.
Well, I'm a big Occam's razor guy. So Occam's razor for me is that this is something the military is working on. And it's something that they don't know how to apply it. Michio Kaku perfectly summed this up. He said, in 20 years, by the year 2040, we will have a machine that can create matter. But the problem is that you can't just put a machine in somebody's living room and say, okay, here's your matter maker. Because if they type in, nuclear bomb, they've got a nuclear bomb.
Yeah.
So he's like the technology will be there in 20 years, but the application you won't see for 80 to 100 years because we just don't know how to use it yet. And I think, honestly, if I had to bet, if I had to put my money on something, that's what it would be, is that this is, I think, human ingenuity, human know-how, human hard work. I do not put any piece of technology past the ability for a human to figure it out, whether it be an exotic system. Yeah.
They are completely justified in hiding it and keeping it under, a lid. I mean, in that case, it would be completely justified. So, who knows? You could be right.
Then again, you see the new B-21 bomber that costs $550 million a piece, and I don't see any alien tech on that thing. It looks just like a stealth bomber. And look, if we've had this, especially according to a lot of researchers, we've had this technology since Roswell, since the 40s. Don't you think we would have seen something other than a metal applied to a paint?
Yeah, and I don't think people understand NASA. I've gone to NASA facilities. I interview astronauts and NASA people. NASA is more like a library. You go in. It's like, these people have conspiracy theories about NASA. It's like having a conspiracy theory about your librarian who invites you to her house to have, cake, and it's just a normal cat woman. I mean, these people are so open. They go to schools. They field questions, and it's part of their nature to be open and to share the exciting scientific discoveries and everything. This isn't a this cabalish type of MJ12 type of thing. A lot of people, and it's not like that at all.
Right.
And so you can actually go find out. You can go talk to these people that you think might have these, hiding aliens behind the door or something. You can get to know all of these people, and they're so excited to share the science and the different stuff going on. So that kind of vision of things is wrong, and it's dangerous. I hate that, a lot of people demonize our public servants, like our astronauts and such, when they are putting their lives on the line, in some cases to help discover and their pensions.
Yeah.
So I mean, I get it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, real quick before you go, I wanted to just give you the opportunity to plug. I've got your website here. If you want to tell us about your website, tell us where to go, how we can follow you, how we can learn more about Alejandro. Where can we find all this stuff? So
yeah, I'm kind of all over the place. Of course, this is Open Minds, where I post the podcasts, and that I'll write pieces and post them here when I can. So on the left-hand side, you see my interviews, which are called the Rojas Reports, or sometimes like this ETs in Religion, I'll do a presentation or I'll kind of an analysis and share that with people. Otherwise, you have my Friday shows there, which is a breaking news live where I talk about the news of the week. And then if you go back real quick, I want to show people on the upper right-hand corner, these are the articles. So that's the UFO news. So some of the articles I've written or I've shared from our group. Sometimes I'll post articles that were in our magazine because that's out of print. So, for instance, the Carter administration's attempt to create a NASA UFO commission. I don't think people know that.
I've read that article. I love that article. We did a review of that article on the show.
It's a really important one to know. And also, there's the article I was talking about. If you want to know how this came about and about how this ties into disclosure, read this: how U.S. intelligence community insiders got the Senate's attention regarding UFOs. These guys had a master plan. Right. They did an end run around the government, and Chris acknowledges that. He's like, hey, we had to bend some rules to make this happen. They intelligently, carefully made this happen, and you can read how they did this right here. And it's an incredible feat. They accomplished what we've all been trying to do for decades, is get more serious attention towards all of this. So I am just so proud of these guys, and they're instant legends. And that's the kind of thing we need to pay attention to, is to help them and piggyback on the work that they've already done. Otherwise, I write for Den of Geek. Right now, who else am I? I've got another couple of pieces coming out that I think people will find interesting and mainstream. I may have some more work along those lines, but and like you said, right now I'm doing mortgages. So, I'm doing that as my day job and trying to keep up with this stuff as much as I can. So that's why people will notice I'm not as regular. Right. For 8 or 9 years there, we had a guy who funded the Open Minds company. And so I was paid to write daily stories about UFOs, and I did. And I just don't have that funding anymore. So I've got to do this just like the rest of us on our off time.
Yeah. Well, I gotta say, I'm going to end it with this. And it was a tweet that somebody had replied to, and I just thought it was a perfect wrap up of who Alejandro Rojas is. No, well, I didn't even get to that one just because we ran out of time. So she said, Chase Klotsky on Twitter said, Alejandro Rojas is one of the most educated and informed researchers in ufology. He really deserves more credit, as he's responsible for the best accolades to everyone else. He's a great influence as always. I can't wait to hear the interview. So I'm going to end it there, my friend, my new friend. I can't call you friend. We're not friends, but you know what I mean.
You can call me friend. I consider you a friend. You're on my shows.
I borrow $20?
Feels like it.
Yeah, no, I'm there every time. I try to support you as much as I can. I try to get people to support you as much as you can. And if I had just one suggestion, anytime somebody makes a donation, call it out. It gets more people to keep.
No, you're right. I forget to do
that would be the only, if I had the only critique, just, hey, man, you see a buck, call it out and say thank you. We need more people like you. And I think you'll be surprised how many folks are going to give you some money, man, because you deserve it.
You're totally right. But
you work your
really
tail off.
Say thank you. I got to say thank you to you, to Chase, to Ryan, to Rodrigo. All of you have said nice things about me because I appreciate that so much. Do I feel like I deserve? I think I get the attention I deserve, which is fine. I'm not doing this. I'm doing this to help, share information and enlighten people. And I think that that's happening. And I'm just so very grateful for those of you who appreciate the work that I do.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of things I didn't get to talk about. Your break in particular. I wanted to talk about your break from ufology because I just wanted to dive into what happened there and sort of what went through your brain. But next time, thank you, Alejandro, from the bottom of my heart. Thank you, everyone who joined us for this live stream. I cannot thank you enough. Don't forget to like the channel, subscribe to the channel, share the channel, ring that bell. Next time when we have Alejandro here, you are notified a half hour or an hour before it comes up. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Alejandro, for coming aboard, getting weird with me here on another episode of the Unidentified Celebrity Review, your home for credible news, reviews, and commentary on everything UFOs. Until next time, you guys, stay safe out there. Peace.